of what your class may be like if you decide to enroll into law school, which I hope you all will take the leap of faith and apply. Kind of some ground rules. I want you to know that this is meant to be an introductory class, so it's not going to be exactly like your law school classes would be, mostly also because we only have 1 hour and most of our courses are done over a 3-hour period. If you are a day student, sometimes your classes get broken up into 2 sections, so you'll come Tuesday and Thursday, but that's really considered one class. Like, for example, when I was in law school, my classes were from 1:30 to 4:30 once a week. Now the schedule's a little different, so they do classes, say, an example might be 11 a.m. to 12:20 Tuesdays and Thursdays, but really that both days are considered one class put together, the material that you cover. So the lecture that I'm doing now is only 1/3 of a whole lecture that I would do in a real class, but this is just to kind of give you a taste of what a law school class is like. I really appreciate student engagement. It makes the class more fun for both you and me. So please feel free to unmute yourself or chime in at any time. You can also type questions in the chat and hopefully Diane can help me monitor those as we go through the PowerPoint. All right. So again, the New American Legal Clinic is a clinic that's on campus. I'm actually here in our beautiful building right now. This is my office. Welcome to my office. And we are the first and longest running clinic. I'm sorry, not the first. We're the longest running clinic at SJCL. It initiated in 2012 when I was in law school. And now we have a second clinic that's called the Bren Clinic, which is a clinic for special education where you as a student advocate help families navigate through the IEP system and negotiating with school districts on obtaining the proper resources for children. But today we're going to focus on immigration, and let's see what we're gonna do. So these are the types of student involvement opportunities and cases that you would work on: citizenship, family-based immigration, U-Visa, VAWA, removal defense, and community outreach. Some of this was covered in the reading. Hopefully you had some chance to skim through it, but if you didn't, don't worry, it's okay. We will go through it together and learn more about what this actually means. And again, it's all completely free of charge. So kind of just by a show of hands, how many, and it can be a Zoom hand or a real hand, how many of you have heard this quote, "Immigration is so political"? Or if you haven't heard it, how many have thought it? How many have felt it? So a few of us. And I may be aging myself here, but there's a show called Mythbusters, right? And these two guys, they go around busting myths, either confirming or busting a myth. So that's what we're going to try to do today. We're going to try to figure out if this statement is a true statement. If we think it's a true statement, it doesn't really matter if it's true or not, but I want to get your take on it. So let's figure this out. The main players in the immigration system are DHS, which is known as the Department of Homeland Security, and DOJ, which is known as the Department of Justice. Let's start with DHS first. Department of Homeland Security is headed by Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Under the Department of Homeland Security are housed several agencies, including CBP, Customs and Border Protection, ICE, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement, USCIS, which is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and OPLA, which is Office of the Prosecuting Legal Aid. So all of these agencies fall under DHS wing. On the other side, we have DOJ, Department of Justice. Now, the person in charge of the Department of Justice is the Attorney General, who currently happens to be Merrick Garland. Some of the agencies that fall under DOJ, not all of them, but some of them that we see often come up in immigration proceedings is EOIR, which is by far the most popular. EOIR stands for Executive Office of Immigration Review. EOIR is the body which houses all of the immigration removal proceedings. When somebody says that they are in removal proceedings, it means that they are already in the process of being deported. It means that the government has decided that they, for some reason, are either inadmissible, means you are not able to be admitted into the United States, inadmissible, or deportable. You're here legally in the United States, but we are deciding that you shouldn't be. We are deciding that you should be deported because you did something wrong. FBI, as we know, is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and the DEA is the Drug Enforcement Agency. So knowing this, now let's try to figure out which branch of government these agencies fall under. So can anybody tell me what are the three major branches of government?
Executive, legislative, and judicial.
Perfect. Wonderful. Ding, 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 100%. You're ready for law school. So the legislative branch of government makes the laws. So they're in charge of trying to pass the laws and make the laws so that we can live as a civilized society. The executive branch enforces the laws. This is where if you do something wrong, you're going to get arrested, right? You're going to get in trouble for that. That falls under the executive branch. And as we know, the number one executive in line is the president. And then the judicial agency interprets the laws. So if you're getting in trouble for breaking one of the laws that the legislative agency made, and the executive arrested you for that, and you're saying, no, 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 I should have never gotten in trouble for this because you're interpreting the law incorrectly, then your claim would go to the judicial branch, right? You go through the court system. That's when you go see a judge and you try to claim your innocence or appeal, et cetera, et cetera. So now knowing that, where do you think that our major players fall? So just unmute yourself. Where do you think DHS falls under? I mean, there's really no wrong answer. This is, we're learning together.
The executive.
Executive, okay, DHS. What about DOJ? Where do we think DOJ, Department of Justice, falls under?
Judicial.
Okay, and that's a common answer. But they both fall under the executive. Why? Because the cabinet members who are tasked with running these two branches of government, these two agencies, DHS and DOJ, are Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and Attorney General Merrick Garland. Does anybody know how I can become the Secretary of DHS or how I can become the Attorney General? If I want to become the Attorney General, what do I have to do?
You have to be appointed.
Appointed by who?
President.
By the president. So that means that my boss is who?
The president.
The president. And if the president doesn't like me, he can say, sorry, you're no longer the Attorney General, you're fired. And we saw that happen several times under the last administration. There were a number of attorney generals, right? We knew Jeff Sessions, very popular, very in the media. And we knew Attorney General William Barr, also very popular in the media. So now we know that the major players of immigration, really, they all answer to the executive branch. Okay, good to know. So now that we know this, we already said that they're both under the executive branch. And this is where kind of the gripe comes with immigration, because they're saying if the president in charge has an affiliation with a political party or has certain views on immigration that he or she believes need to be followed, then that's what's going to happen. Because the president is going to say, Attorney General, you're in charge of making sure that my views on immigration are being followed by the EOIR, the Executive Office of Immigration Review. And Secretary Mayorkas, it's your job to make sure that these other immigration agencies, CBP, ICE, USCIS, and OPLA, are also, so to speak, respecting my wishes on how I want the immigration laws to be enforced. Are you with me? All right. So why do I care? Because other courts are independent courts, but it's not the case with immigration. What do you mean? I mean that if I file a case, for example, I file a citizenship case with USCIS, which is the customer service agency brand of immigration, which is where I file to ask for something. So I'm legally in the United States and I'm a lawful permanent resident, what we know commonly as a green card holder. If I file my citizenship case with USCIS and they say, no, denied, we don't want to give you citizenship, I then appeal my case with the AAO, which is the Administrative Appeals Office. Okay, it's a sub branch of USCIS, and I'm still under the big branch of what? Where's
DHS.
DHS? I'm still under DHS, which is still under the president, which still means that that's annoying. Okay, great. So now, let's say that I am an immigration court. We discussed what that means. We discussed that that means that if the government has already initiated proceedings against me, they're telling me, Miss Barreto, we want to deport you because you did something wrong. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you did something wrong. And let's say that the immigration judge says, yes, you're going to be deported. Bummer. Well, what can I do? Well, I can appeal my case, but when I appeal it, I'm appealing it to the BIA, which is the Board of Immigration Appeals. The BIA is housed under which big agency?
Department of Justice.
Department of Justice. And who is in charge of the Department of Justice?
The president.
Ultimately, the president, but overseeing the
Garland.
Department of Justice is Garland, who was appointed by, like Stacy said, the president. Oh my gosh, can I get away from the president? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's find out if we can get away from the president. So let's say that the Office of Administrative Appeals says, nope, we agree with USCIS and your citizenship is denied. You're still denied citizenship. Finally, I can appeal my case to a federal district court, which is an independent judicial body that falls under the judicial branch. Now, federal judges are appointed by who? The president. I hear the mouth, I see the mouthing, the president. But different is when a new president comes in, they can't say, oh, I'm cleaning house and getting rid of all the judges ever. No, they can only fill vacancies. So the federal judges that are sitting right now, they may have been appointed by President Biden, President Obama, President Clinton, President Reagan, President Trump. I mean, could have been any president. We don't know who they were appointed by unless you do their research. And they're usually a panel of judges, right? It's not usually just one judge. So that's hopeful. We're moving in the right direction here. All right. But if my case gets denied in immigration court under EOIR, and I appealed to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and they say, nope, sorry, we're still deporting you. Then what can I do? Well, I can appeal my case to a federal circuit court. And we'll talk about how many circuits are in just a second. But before we get to that, if the federal circuit court says, we still don't agree, you're still deported, who then can I appeal my case to? Is there anywhere else I can go? Any ideas? Or no, you could say no. Say, nope, sorry, you're done. What's the highest court?
The Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court. But you probably already know that the Supreme Court hears such a small number of cases each year, and they get so many petitions to hear cases that your chances of actually getting a hearing before the Supreme Court are very low. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Please try. I would love to see you at the Supreme Court one day. But, you know, actually getting an appeal heard by the Supreme Court is very difficult. And they usually want to hear issues of constitutional law. This was an abuse of my rights under the Constitution. And they usually want to hear novel issues of law, things that haven't come up before. And so to actually get your case heard by the Supreme Court is very difficult. But could you appeal it? Sure, you could appeal it. But if the Supreme Court denies your appeal, if they say, no, we're not going to hear this case, not interested, sorry that happened to you, then the Federal Circuit Court decision stands. That's the last word. That's the final word. Okay, so do you see how long, how hard it is to actually get into the judicial side of things in immigration? Now you hear the words immigration judge and immediately you're thinking judicial branch, but that's incorrect because immigration judges are employed by EOIR, Executive Office of Immigration Review, whose boss is Merrick Garland, and the boss of Mr. Garland is the president. So how many circuits are there, you may be asking? How many circuits are there by looking at this map? That's a good question. Let's see. How many circuits do we see?
11.
11. So there's 11 different circuits where your case could be heard, but the circuit that you appeal to depends on where you live. So we said this Federal Circuit Court, this blue box here, where it says Federal Circuit Court here, that's where you would end up. But we live in California, so that means, well, I'm sorry, I live in California. I'm assuming you're all in California as well. You may or may not be, but if you're in California like me, what circuit are we in?
Ninth.
Ninth. The Ninth Circuit and the Second Circuit tends to be more liberal. Not surprising, because California is here, which is known as a more liberal state, and also New York, also known as a more liberal state. The circuits are based on population. Yes, California has a lot of population, but not as much as, say, Idaho, Montana, which is why they're part of our circuit. And on the East Coast, New York is very dense, which is why that circuit looks smaller, but it's actually not if you base it on population estimates. Which is why it's very important to complete the census, and please tell all of your friends and family to do so every 10 years. Thank you for coming to my public service announcement. Okay, so why does this matter? Because it's forum shopping sometimes. The grants of asylum in California can be somewhere in the 70s, where in the 5th and 11th Circuit can be under 10%. Do you think that people who apply for asylum in California just happen to be persecuted more than those who apply for asylum in, say, Mississippi? Probably not. It probably has a lot to do with the judges hearing the cases, right? How they view asylum. I mean, it's kind of silly to think, oh, it's because the people that apply for asylum in Mississippi, they just don't have a strong case. Less than 5% of them have a strong case. But in California, when they apply, more than 70% of them have a strong case. Doesn't really make sense in our minds, right? Doesn't, like, how is that possible to have such a huge disparity? All right. So what does that mean for us? Well, it's important to first know the difference between what is a citizen and what is a resident. Every time I'm on like immigration forums, I see things like, oh, well, why don't they just become a citizen? It's so easy. Is it though? Because I've been working immigration 10 years and it doesn't feel that easy, So let's figure that out. How do you become a citizen? Well, first, in order to even be a citizen, you have to be a resident. And so what is a resident? A resident is someone who is permanently allowed to live in the United States. And the official legal title is lawful permanent resident. Lawful permanent resident. But there's lots of things that residents cannot do. And if you yourself are a resident or have known a resident, you may already be familiar with this, but it's important to note the distinctions. So one, residents cannot vote. They cannot serve on a jury. They cannot remain outside of the United States for more than 6 months without special permission, called a re-entry permit. They can still be deported, even for very old convictions. So that means that I think I'm safe here in the US. But if I did something, even if it was a really long time ago, that's considered a deportable offense, I could still be deported. And yes, that includes stealing earrings from Target. Like things that you are like, oh, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It happened 20 years ago. Still could be a deportable offense. And residents must renew their green card every 10 years. The current fee is $540. This in parentheses is called MICA, and that's what a lot of the Hispanic speaking community calls their green card, their lawful permanent resident card, MICA, if you ever hear that in Spanish. Okay. So what about being a citizen? Well, some of us take citizenship for granted because we were born in the United States, and this is extra super bonus points, but does anybody know what amendment made it so that we are born into the United States and get automatic citizenship? Mm-hmm. 14th Amendment. And that's important to know because during the prior administration, there were some talks about like abolishing that amendment. Now that would be almost nearly impossible. Making changes to the Constitution are extremely difficult. I mean, not impossible. Obviously, we have 27 amendments, so it happened at least 27 times. But, especially with now the divisiveness and the polarization of politics, I don't think it would be very feasible. But we are acquired, or I am, and some of you may be, acquired citizenship just by being born in the US territory. Now, you may be surprised to know this, but that's not the same for even many developed countries like Australia, Japan. If I go to Australia tomorrow and I have a baby, I'm not necessarily going to have an Australian baby. There has to be certain prerequisites that my child must meet in order to be an Australian citizen. So there are some people who are citizens of nowhere because they were born in another country that doesn't have just birth acquired citizenship, and they don't meet the requirements to be a citizen of where their parents were citizens of. So they're like no citizen. So that's interesting to know. But what is citizenship? How do I get it? Well, to become a citizen, you have to be 5 years as a lawful permanent resident. That means you have to have that green card, that lawful permanent residency card for at least 5 years, or a minimum of 3 years if you are currently married to a US citizen and have lived in that marriage with the citizen for at least 3 years. There's also an English competency, reading, writing, and understanding portion of the exam. But there are some exemptions. So people who have been residents for at least 20 years for at least 20 years and are at least 50 years old, they can choose to do the citizenship exam and application in their preferred language. Same thing if you are at least 55 years old and have been a lawful permanent resident / green card holder for at least 15 years, then you also qualify to do the application and the test in your preferred language. There's also a medical exemption. So if for some reason you have a client who has some sort of medical condition, for example, dementia, Alzheimer's, but they're not 50 years old with their residency 20 years plus, or they're not 55 with their residency 15 years plus, but they suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's, then they may qualify for a medical exemption, which means that the doctor says, you qualify for me to waive away the requirement of you having to learn English and the civics examination. So the civics examination is where your client has to learn 100 questions. And of those 100 questions, 10 randomly are asked during the interview. We don't know which 10, but they're going to pick 10 to ask. If your client answers 6 correctly, they've passed. And that's in addition to the reading and writing requirement. So the officer during the citizenship interview will ask them, can you please read this sentence? And can you please write this sentence? So in addition to the 100 questions they have to learn reading and writing, but if they have the medical exemption, they do not have to learn the reading, the writing, or the 100 questions. Now, the people who qualify under 50-20 or 55-15, they still have to learn the 100 questions, but they get to learn them in their preferred language. Now, there is an exemption to the 100 questions if your applicant is 65 years old and has been a resident for at least 20 years. They don't have to learn the 100, they have to learn an easier test of only 20. And they also qualify to do it in their preferred language. Now, I've had clients who need the medical exemption who are only 21. Why? Because they're going through cancer treatment and the radiation and the chemo makes it so that they cannot learn the 100 questions, and that's no problem. So don't assume that because your client is young and looks healthy, that they don't qualify for a medical exemption. I don't have a medical degree. I'm not a licensed doctor, so I'm not qualified to make the determination of whether or not someone qualifies for a medical exemption. Okay. The other things that need to be reviewed are good moral character. So your client has to show that essentially they're deserving of getting their citizenship, that they have no convictions or no issues that would bar them from obtaining citizenship. And they also have to show that they meet the physical presence requirement / the continuous residence requirement. That goes back to what we said about how residents cannot be out of the country for more than 6 months at a time. So if your client said, oh, I went to Europe and I spent a whole year in Europe because I was exploring, Italy and Rome and France and Spain, sounds awesome, but you may not be eligible for citizenship because you were gone for more than the time allowed. Okay, so let's pause for questions. I see some in the chat. Oh, I see some answers. Okay, thanks, Katie, for participating in the chat. I appreciate it. But now let's play another game. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Just kidding. Are you smarter than a naturalization applicant? So without Googling, let's run through some of the questions. How many amendments does the Constitution have? Now, this is a gimme because I gave you this information. So how many amendments does it have?
27.
27. So if you were a citizenship applicant, you would get that one right. These are real questions on the citizenship exam. These are a few of the 100. Who was the president during World War I? Diane knows this one, right, Diane? I don't know it either, but it's Woodrow Wilson.
I wouldn't have gotten that.
Okay. We elect a U.S. senator for how many years?
Like the term?
What's the term of a senator?
6 years.
6 years. Lacey's ready to become a U.S. citizen. Working at it. All right. When was the Constitution written? This always trips everyone up.
Oh.
feel like Lorena knows the answer, but she doesn't want to blow it for us.
Go for it, Lorena.
This is one I actually do not know.
I'm trying to think if it's in Hamilton. That's how I would know it.
Throwing a number out there. 1787, that's the most common answer, Renee. Thank you for participating in the chat. 1787. People always think it's 1776 though.
That's the
You know,
Declaration of
you see
Independence.
the Declaration of Independence. You see those shirts that say like 1776 because that's when the United States became independent from Great Britain. But Renee got it right. You sure there was no Googling in there, Renee? Just kidding. All right. So there are a couple other ways that people can get citizenship, but that's really only if they qualify to derive or acquire citizenship. So what does that mean? That means that I was not born in the US, but because my parents are citizens, I qualify to be a citizen too. There's two distinctions. One of them is I was not born in the US, but I claim that the moment I came out of my mother's womb, I'm already a citizen. I'm a citizen the first breath I take. And that usually has to do with whether or not A, your parents are married at the time that you're born, or B, and B, not or B, and B, does the citizen parent, the one that you're claiming that is a citizen who you gained your citizenship, do they have the required physical presence in the US prior to your birth? And there's regulations on that depending on when the birth of the child was. So we'd have to look that up one by one based on dates of birth. So that's one way. I can be a citizen the second that I come out of my mom's womb if I meet those requirements, even if I was born in Japan. The other way is I was born in Japan. I now live in the US as a lawful permanent resident. I'm 13 years old and I have my green card. I'm a lawful permanent resident. And my mother just became a citizen yesterday. I can petition to derive citizenship from her because I'm still a minor. I'm 18 years old. I'm under 18 years old. I'm in the US, residing pursuant to lawful admission. And my mother, who just became a citizen, has custody of me. So there are different ways. And when you file Form N-600, you don't necessarily have to be a minor at the time that you file it. It's not only for kids. It's saying I met those requirements long ago, but I didn't know that I was already a citizen, but turns out I spoke to attorney Stacy and I am. Cool. So Stacy helps him fill out the form and we go on our merry way, right? We present the evidence to make our argument. Okay. So let's do a case study. This is an actual case. It's called Chanu v. Garland. And who's Garland? We just talked about who's Garland.
Attorney General.
Attorney General. So when they sue, back to where we were at in the federal courts, because look, we're in Ninth Circuit here. If you look at the citation, which you'll learn to do in my legal methods class, I promise I'll show you how to do this. You learn to cite the case. You learn that Chanu is the petitioner and he's suing Garland. He's saying, I'm pissed at you because you didn't give me my citizenship. And I'm going to sue you in federal court, the Ninth Circuit. And I'm suing Garland because he's in charge of enforcing these laws. And I live in California, so I'm in the Ninth Circuit. So let's talk about Chanu's case. Chanu entered the US lawfully at age 13 under a student visa. His mother naturalized in 1999. Became a resident at age 18. He was a resident. So he entered with a student visa, but then after his mom got her citizenship, he somehow got his lawful permanent residency at age 18. He landed in deportation proceedings due to convictions. So the government picks him up and says, Chanu, we're deporting you because you have these convictions that we want to deport you for. And he said, no, I'm already a citizen based on my mom's citizenship. When she got her citizenship in 1999, I became a citizen too. Just what we talked about, right? But the government said, no, you're not, because you were not a lawful permanent resident. You didn't become a lawful permanent resident until you were 18. You were already an adult. So sorry, you don't qualify. And he said, well, it doesn't matter if I wasn't a lawful permanent resident. I was admitted, I came to the US legally with my student visa, and I was permanently residing here. I had no intention to leave again. I was already set up in school. I had my Xbox on the TV. I had rent I was paying. We weren't going anywhere. So you're telling me that because I didn't have that little green card, I can't be a citizen? And the government said, yep, that's what we're telling you. So what do you think happened to Chanu? Did he get his citizenship or no? Do we need that green card? Do we have to say no? Let's go back to our other slide.
Well, I mean, probably not, since he was already here legal and he got caught, which means he probably would have got sent back, right?
Well, if we go back to our N600, thanks for chiming in, Carlos, because that's the thought. We go back and they say, residing in the USA pursuant to lawful admission for permanent residence. Permanent residence, not permanent residency. What's the difference? Well, Carlos, he was here legally though, because you're saying he should get sent back. He was here illegally, but he's saying, no, I didn't enter illegally. I came here with my student visa. I was cool. But the government's saying, student visa isn't the same as lawful permanent residency. A student visa is meant to be while you're studying. Lawful permanent residency means you're here indefinitely unless you do something wrong.
Oh, see, I missed that part. My mistake.
No, that's okay. We're in this together. So what does that mean?
So that means that since he only has a student visa, he has to go back once the term is over and then apply for permanent residency while in his country of origin. And then if he gets permission, then he can come back and stay here for X amount of time, as long as he chooses to act within lawful boundaries, correct?
That's what the government's saying. That's what their argument was. But Chanu and his attorney's argument was like, no, the statute says pursuant to lawful permanent residence. It doesn't say lawful permanent residency, which means that I don't need a green card. I just need to be here lawfully and permanently. And I entered lawfully with my visa, and permanently because I was enrolled in school, wasn't trying to leave. My mom was already a citizen. So where was I going to go? She wasn't going to send me back home alone. So the conclusion of this case, what the Ninth Circuit said is Chanu's right. Lawful permanent residency is not required. But yes, lawful permanent residence, lawfully entered and permanently residing in the US is enough to satisfy the requirement. So one tiny word changed the outcome of this case.
Did his convictions have anything to do with, like, would they have any precedence over this case at all?
So that's the beautiful thing about N600 is even if I'm convicted of murder, if I meet the requirements to derive citizenship from my parents, it doesn't matter because I'm a citizen at the moment that I'm a citizen, and citizens cannot be deported. I mean, there's plenty of natural born American people who we probably wish we could deport, right? We're like, gosh, would love to deport that person. They're terrible, you know, like serial killers, let's say. It's like someone crazy, right? Like spectrum crazy. But we can't because they're citizens.
Right.
And that's how Chanu is. Chanu's like, I was already a citizen. Sorry, I'm not sorry. Or is it? What do you mean? You just said it was. Yeah, I did in the 9th Circuit. Remember, this case is a 9th Circuit case. So what do you mean? Well, I mean that in the 11th Circuit, they said, nope, in our town, you need the green card. We're not gonna say that living here lawfully, permanently is enough. You need the green card if you're in the 11th Circuit. And the 2nd Circuit and the 9th Circuit, where we are, where Chanu litigated the case, they said, no, something less is okay. You can prove that you entered lawfully and that you were here legally and that you were here permanently. We're not gonna fault you for the green card. That's okay. And some of the other circuits, like the 1st and the 5th, have declined to interpret. They said, no, thank you. This question is not before this court. So if it comes before the court, maybe we'll talk about it then. But right now, we don't have to decide this because that case is not important to us. So let's go back to our myth. Immigration is so political. Did we confirm the myth or did we bust the myth? What do you guys think? Put it in the chat. Let's hear from everyone in the chat. Confirm or busted? There's no wrong answer. This is just how you're feeling. We got lots of confirmed. It's tied to the party who has the presidency. A lot of times it is. So it's kind of confirmed and kind of busted. What do you mean? Oh, my light came on now. I mean, it's kind of confirmed and kind of busted because yes, if we are back to our slide here, if we are here before we get to the judicial, it's pretty political. It's based on who's in charge of those departments, of those agencies. But when we get here to the federal courts, these are independent bodies, but different circuits interpret laws in different ways. And the ones that interpret the laws in more conservative ways tend to be the more conservative states, like the 5th and the 11th, where they said, you're going to need that green card if you want to make that argument here. So as a professor in law school, our job is not to make you feel any certain type of way of the law. It's to present the law and you make your own conclusions. So whether you say confirmed or busted doesn't make any difference to me. I'm just giving you the information and you decide what you want to do with it. You decide what issue of the argument you want to be on. What does that mean? That means that you can be an immigration attorney and help immigrants obtain legal status, but by the same token, and still a very honorable job, you can be a government attorney and be on the prosecuting side. Just like in criminal law, we have public defenders and we have district attorneys, both very good jobs, both government jobs. Very opposite ends of the spectrum, right? One is prosecuting people, telling them, nope, we're gonna get a conviction on this case. And the other one is saying, oh, no, you're not, because I have a good defense, or you don't have enough evidence to charge my client with that crime. So any questions about what we talked about today, about citizenship, residency? These are just some of the clients that we've helped in the last couple of years here at NALC. I love sharing this so that you can see that if you decide to come to SJCL and decide to participate in the clinic, these are some of the real faces that you get to interact with.
How many clients have you served, Linda?
We usually on a year serve about 700 clients a year here at the clinic. We have a staff of 5 full-time staff, and that's not including our student advocates. So right now this semester, I have 5 students participating in the clinic. I keep my numbers low because, well, 1, COVID restrictions, and 2, I personally supervise all students. So I want to make sure that you get enough of my attention and supervision. So I can't host a big class because we're doing hands-on work. And the cases now that I've done probably just throughout my career, I mean, if I've been practicing 8 years, average of 700 cases a year, let's say I've helped 5,600 immigrants.
Wow.
So part 2 of this class kind of moves into this other stuff, the family-based immigration, and talking more about, you know, adjustment of status, which is how do I even get residency? We talked about how to get citizenship, but you can't get citizenship unless you're a resident, we talked about. And I'd love to host a part 2 of this class. If you're ever interested, I'm sure Diane can facilitate that. Or if you apply and come to SJCL, I'd love to just talk to you in person too. But there's so much to learn. It's really fascinating. And I want to leave it open for questions too. And again, they can be questions about law school in general, questions about immigration, or questions about the presentation. We still have a few minutes before our time together is up.
Also, Professor Barreto is our one of our professors who teaches our legal methods, which is a required course in your first year. So if you have any questions at all, now's a good time to ask.
When are students able to work in the clinic?
Great question. Usually it's after your first year of study, because your first year of study are what we call core classes, which means you have to pass your first year with a minimum GPA in order to be able to move on to your second year of study. And so your first year, you don't get any electives. It's all like, it has to be the classes that you have to take. So you can participate in your second year and beyond, and that's true for any of our clinics. And even if you decide to do an internship, say that you're like, I want to intern for the DA, you can do that after your second year and earn units toward your degree.
I have a question.